Welcome to the Prime Property Finance Podcast with Gareth Morgan and Mark Watts. This unique podcast will dive deep into all areas of property investing finance, going behind the scenes with property professionals, investors and clients. Between us, we have 35 plus years experience in property finance. The podcast has been launched to share knowledge, mindset requirements and experiences of successful investors and professionals. We aim to simplify many of the complicated areas of finance and investing and provide valuable and easy to implement tips. Keep an eye out for our new longer episodes every Tuesday and our shorter ones every Friday. Welcome back to part 3 in this mini-series around momentum investing and the 3 C's. So far in this series, we've talked about clarity and confidence. We've discussed knowing where you're going, building a strategy and developing the confidence to actually take action. But there's one final piece of the puzzle that often gets overlooked. And in many ways, that's the one that opens the most doors. In property investing and in business generally, success isn't about what you know. It's about who you know, but also what those other people believe about you. And that one word comes down to credibility. Are you credible to do this deal? And this is so important in property investing. So we're just going to kind of boil that down now in this episode and, discuss the kind of various elements of it before we jump in. Mark, any thoughts? What does credibility mean to you at a high level?
Obviously, we've spoken over the last 2 episodes about the clarity and the confidence, which feeds into the credibility side of things. Credibility is so important when you're dealing with all the various component parts, or the people, I should say, involved in the process. So not least the vendor. If you're going to make an offer, do they believe that you can complete on that transaction? The agent, again, if you're going to be presenting an offer that's going to then be presented on, especially if you want to go under market value and various bits and pieces, are they confident that you're going to deliver on your side of the bargain so that they don't end up with egg on their face and so on? You've got lenders. So lenders don't just lend on the deal numbers. In fact, the first element they look at is the person. So who are we lending to, irrespective of the deal? Are they credible? So that's why we ask things around expertise and background and what have you. And then if you're going to need investors, if you're going to need capital, we say that it's obviously very capital intense. Can you borrow the money? Are the investors trusting of you? Do you have the credibility to ask for the money to get the answer you require? And can you deliver and ultimately return the money back? That's what's going to be based around, not just the security. Nobody wants the security. They just want the money back and you just do what you say you're going to do. So I think this is the final piece of the jigsaw for me. We get the fake it till you make it and all of that sort of stuff, where there is elements of that. And, you have to step forward, but you also have to be credible in the way you do things. And credibility is built over time through actions, not just through saying you can do something.
Yeah, absolutely. It's are you going to do what there's an integrity part of it, doing what you say you're going to do. But with credibility is easier with experience because you've done what you said you were going to do. And oftentimes if you haven't done any deals yet, that's quite the difficult one. But it's more about positioning, but also speaking the right language. And that's part of the confidence and the clarity on what you've already, the work you've already done, making sure that, because if you've done enough research and if you've educated yourself around the way to speak to people and the words and the phrases that are being used, that's going to show that you've got a bit of confidence. And I know you've got a very small prime example of this. Do you want to share that?
Yeah, so one of the things that jumps out to me is, so when we look at the end value of a property, if people who are professional in the space refer to it as a GDV, the gross development value. Where I hear it, especially at our training courses, is people come and say, what's the DUV, the done-up value of the property? DUV isn't actually a thing. It's GDV, gross development value. And that to me just speaks to a possible lack of knowledge. Now, obviously, I don't get too hung up on it. It's not one of those things, but it's just when you're making a decision on someone, there's lots of little signals that have been given out. What words are they using? How clear are they on the strategy they're going to go for? What's their return? What's their goals, etc. And these are just little sound bites that that can help destroy or take away from some of the credibility. So they start off really, really well, then go with DUV, and I'm like, oh, hang on, DUV, it should be GDV. If you're experienced in the space, you'd refer to it as a GDV. So there's a little bits really around it, I think.
Yeah, thank you. And that's it's not being pedantic. It's just a really simple example of something around the credibility piece. So we've talked about the different areas and aspects where credibility is super important from a property investor's perspective. One we probably haven't mentioned is also builders as well. But we're just going to break some of these down and kind of try and help understand why credibility is important with them, and what kind of a little bit about what you can do to do more deals effectively. So should we start with estate agents? I mean, the majority of people are going to be, if they're going to be viewing properties, then the majority of them are going to be through estate agents, and estate agents deal with potential buyers all day, every day, and therefore their credibility tick list in their mind will be going off as soon as you pick up the phone, isn't it? So as you just mentioned there, there'll just be some little red flags if you say things incorrectly. So it's just learning some of that. And that's not to deter you. It's just to kind of give you the heads up. And this just feeds into what we've already been talking about. So where would you start from an estate agent's point of view?
Yeah, so I think I kind of used an example in a previous episode around where I just went in 2 feet and probably over-explained myself. And that's probably just trying to instill that I know what I'm talking about. Well, actually over-explaining is a sign of lack of confidence, really, or possibly a lack of credibility, where you just go, no, this is how it works and this is what I'm going to do. Ring me or don't ring me type approach. Move on that way. So I do think that, how you speak to them. Now, we refer to language and using the correct words and terminology where possible and where it makes sense. But also, I come from a financial services environment at HSBC where they were just using words for the sake of using words as well, and it just became ridiculous in the end. So there was a lot of that going on. So you don't overcomplicate, stay human, but just be aware that there are certain phrases and terminology that you need to use to keep the credibility going. And as you quite rightly say, they speak to, and the keyword is your potential buyers. There's so many tire kickers out there. Since mid-COVID through to now, I don't think there's been an absence of buyers. So agents aren't necessarily having to go out and fight to win the traffic to come in to buy properties or get them rented. Therefore, you could argue they're being a lot more selective. And therefore, you need to make yourself stand out above the pile as to why you're going to have the viewing, why your offer should be taken serious, and so on. And there's, I think this is one of your strengths for sure. Things around follow-up is absolutely key. Do you want to just go through some of that? Because I know that's something that you do really well.
Yeah, I think, for me, it's all around about, if you think property is a relationship game. And so having good relationships, because, the old adage, especially with deals, the good deals don't hit the market. Or if they do, they're on there for a very short piece of time, because agents will have I know people say that they don't or whatever, they'll say there's a little black book, because they've got a black book of investors they know will deliver because they've done so in the past and they've got good relationships. So, and they'll know which of their investors this specific deal is good for, because they own that little space in their mind where if it's a 2-bed mid-terrace in these streets, that person's going to buy it. If it's a block of flats over there, this person's going to buy it. If it's a bit of land, this person's going to buy it. So you need to own that little piece of space in the agent's head. But before you do that, it's building relationships. So what would you do is, if you book a viewing, make sure you turn up and be on time. They're busy as well. You don't want to be serious about the property. Ask the right questions, and build a relationship. Try to get to understand them, the types of people that they're working with, and the types, what would make the deal make sense. Like you said, if you're going to make an offer, make it, but justify if it's a lot below the asking price for whatever reason, justify the offer. It's not just a case of, oh, just chuck it. This person's just chucking in silly offers in a waste of time. Explain to them, look, for us as investors, we need to make a profit. Therefore, this is what kind of profit margin we need to make. It's going to cost us this based on based on the viewing. We identified this level works. So this is kind of where we need to be to make it make sense. What do you think they've got any chance of accepting that? And so it's not just, emailing them with a ridiculous offer. It's, having a conversation and explaining the thought process as to how to go. And the majority of the time, it's not going to be suitable. But if you give them the feedback and then if you keep an eye on it and notice that it hasn't sold, then just keep checking in and just saying, look, I can see that still hasn't sold. Where are they at? Is there an opportunity? Do you think our offer's still on the table? Always leave the offer still on the table. And just, if they change their mind, and with time, if things don't sell, people do become more motivated, and that's it. Then it becomes a numbers game. But where it really does count, if you say you're going to do something, then you've got to do it. If you're going to go for a property and you agree and on certain parameters, if it's speed, one of the things that probably will annoy agents, whereas we see a lot of people saying they're cash buyers when they're not. So there's a slight difference between being a cash buyer and being like a cash buyer with bridging finance. So there's a slight discrepancy where properties are advertised as cash only, which cash only means that it's not mortgageable in the traditional sense. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't get a bridging loan on that property, for instance. But what we see is that people will go in and say that they're cash buyers. When they're not, they can buy it through a bridging loan, which is absolutely fine. But it's just the way you handle that conversation. You're moving the goalposts a little bit, and it's not, I think you just got to be making sure your values are aligned, and you're just passing that message on in the right way. Because all of those little things, like you said, build a relationship with the agent.
Yeah, and look, how you behave over time will speak far more than the words coming out of your mouth. Yeah. So whilst we spoke about language, and yes, it's important, and we talk about early credibility to get this guy knows what he's talking, or this woman knows what they're talking about. Ultimately, if you don't follow up, do the right behaviors, follow through on whatever you say you're going to do, that's an instant way to lose credibility as well. So it takes a lot to gain it. It can disappear in a flash just by not doing things in the correct manner. So misleading people, saying you're one thing when you're something else. We can go tomorrow, we can act quickly, all of that sort of stuff. And then it transpires you can't, and we're 8 weeks into a process, you haven't even got an offer yet. All of these things are going to mean that the next time you try and deal with that agent, they're just not going to take you that serious, because they would have had their fingers burnt, and they are firefighting on their side then, because they've set that expectation on the seller, who's now having to go at them. And if you can make the agent's life easy, then you're on a real winner.
The other thing you can do really early on, if you are serious with a particular one, is if you've never bought anything, at least you can show credibility with an agent by saying, look, this is my, you can send them an email or whatever. Here's my strategy. Here's the types of properties I'm looking for. These are the areas. This is my price point. This is what I'm looking for. You can also send them a proof of your cash, your deposits. You can send them a decision in principle for a mortgage. You could send them your ID, so that they've got everything on file, so that they go, all right, this person is, all right, they may not have bought any property, but they know what they're looking for. They're credible because they've sent us ID. Here's my solicitor's details. So should we be in a position that we find the deal that works for us, we can move quickly. You're going to gain loads of confidence just by doing that, because you're making the agent's job easy, and you're doing half the work for them, and you're doing it up front before they've even asked for it. So that would be a really big one for me early on in the process.
Yeah, definitely. And we speak to and staying consistent with it, because as in the previous episode, we spoke about motivation. The motivation is high, so your intent is really high in the beginning, but that will wane, especially if you're not getting deals straight away, and the agent might not have something on their desk that fits the criteria you just explained to them. But keep the follow-up on a monthly basis or a fortnightly basis, just touching base, any news, etc. This is a long game. You need more than one agent on side. You'll have multiple of these conversations, so touching base with them all. And eventually something will come, but you need to be disciplined off the back of it. And that will then build credibility, because you're in it for the long game. The agents, I have no doubt, are speaking to loads of people who are keen to be property investors, go and view the one property, and they never hear from them ever again. Well, that's the majority, not the minority. And you're now battling against that stereotype. So you need to be different to break the mold. And then, you'll find then that you'll start to develop those relationships over time.
And also, once we go back to the criteria point and the clarity. So if you say, well, I'm gonna just invest in these specific postcodes, and what we refer to probably as like a gold mine area, where I'm only going to invest in this quarter of a mile, square mile, that also makes your job a lot easier because there's only 4 estate agents that work in that area. Well, you can go and visit those 4 estate agents on a semi-regular basis and pick up the phone to them regularly. Well, you're only dealing with 4 agents. That reduces all of the noise that you have in terms of building relationships. You're just being super focused, which, again, just makes the job easier. So I think we've nailed the agents there. Let's move on to vendors. I've done a number of deals in the past direct with vendors, off-market deals then, shall we say. And for me, I've done it, made mistakes and learned from it. One of the people is they just go straight into the negotiation. And obviously, if there's no agent involved, ultimately you need to know, like, and trust key aspects of it and building the relationship and trying to understand, what their problems are, how you can help solve their problems, and how you've been able to help solve those problems in the past for other people. So that's the credibility piece. So we did someone else in your shoes, we did this with them to help them through that problem. And this was the solution. And this is why this was the result of that. And this is why they were happy about that outcome. So trying to give them some experience about, if you've got a professional background, whether that's being professional services, or if there's a problem with their property that it's got subsidence, where if you're a builder that deals with subsidence on a daily basis, say, look, we do this on a daily basis. This isn't the problem for us. We can solve this. All of those things will help build credibility. So you might be your first investment, but you can help them with this problem. So, and then it's just the way you communicate again, follow up and deliver. If you say, right, I'll come back to you next week, come back to them next week. Simple things that phrases that people, and they just don't follow up. And that's, one of the biggest lessons there. And they need to know that you're able to deliver on it.
Yeah. And I think, as you were talking there, I was thinking around different scenarios. So if I was simply just, I found a property that wasn't on the market and I was just going to offer to buy it and get a mortgage, yes, I need some credibility, but perhaps not that much. It's just straightforward. I think as the deal becomes more complex, you need far more credibility to go with it. So to have that negotiation, to get down to the why, if you're going to be doing, lease purchase options or vendor finance, all sorts of these things, then your credibility goes up the scale alongside the complexity of the transaction, because you've now got to convince them to do a lot more than just sell you a property, which you'll complete in 8 weeks. So just bear in mind that credibility means different things based on the scenario. If you haven't got a portfolio and you haven't done it and you're trying to do these really complicated deals, you might find it hard to find that credibility. Whereas if you're simply I'm buying my next door neighbour's house under market value because I know them, but they don't know my financial situation, that's just a case of, here's my mortgage in principle, I'm going to buy it. It's as simple as that. So just bear that in mind, and put the context in where you're at. And this speaks back to, which we'll come on to in due course, the lender piece.
Well, I was just going to say, you might as well dive into the lender piece as well, because what you've just said there is the same, isn't it?
Exactly.
From a lender perspective, if it's a vanilla buy-to-let and you've got a job and you've got a deposit and you're just buying a straightforward buy-to-let, there aren't going to be many questions and you're going to have plenty of lenders to choose from and everything else. But as you go up the complexity ladder, that credibility is going to be more important. Do you want to just kind of add some more meat to the bone from a lender's perspective there?
Yeah, sure. So again, we come back to what's your ability to complete. So if you're doing a mortgage, straightforward, well, I say straightforward mortgage, that's a kiss to death in our world. If we say straightforward, it never is. But yeah, if it's a vanilla buy-to-let, as we would call it, then that's usually straightforward enough. where you want to then go and do your BRRs, you buy refurbished refinancing, maybe it's a conversion of a property from a commercial into residential, converting the loft space, or, there's varying degrees of things that happen within properties to get you to the end goal. Commercial property, HMOs, all have barriers to entry in terms of your experience. So the lender, if you think about it, is their risk is in that you can't run that properly and you damage the security in any way, shape or form. Whether that be it's under rented, you can't afford the mortgage, they don't want a default position and they don't want their security to be worth less than what it's currently worth. And all of that comes back to credibility and your ability to manage it. So if we take an example, you're a first-time landlord, first-time investor, okay, you've got this deal on the table that says, I'm going to convert this 3-story townhouse into a block of 3 flats. Super common. We see it a lot, especially in England. You've got it under permitted development. So they think, it doesn't even need planning. It's like, well, it does. It just needs a different type of planning. The planning process is meant to be lighter. And that's a red flag. In its first instance, it doesn't even need planning. I'm like, well, yes, it does. But we'll get there. Is the risk there is that you can't fulfill the project. Is you start ripping out the inside of a house to convert into 3 flats that you've never done before, and you can't get them to build in regs and the sign off on the planning and what have you. Then they're unrefinanceable and unsellable. So all of a sudden now you can't repay your bridge loan, and the lender's now got a mess on their hands that they need to fix in order to recover the money that they've lent out. So that's what the risk is to the lender. So you're trying to show and demonstrate to them that you have the ability to do these things. That's why they want to see incremental increases in complexity rather than diving straight in. I would argue the thing that bucks the trend of that is if you're a builder, you might not have done it before in terms of your own property, but you might have done this conversion 100 times before. Therefore, you come with that type of credibility, not the credibility of I've been an investor doing this. So again, it's that, can you do what you say you're going to do?
Yeah, and ultimately that's what it's all about, isn't it? Well, like we talk about, if an agent gets a call and there's a deal and there's two investors bidding for the same one, we've seen it with a business transaction recently that we were trying to buy a business. This is not actually related to property, and the people we were trying to buy the business off actually had a higher offer from somebody else, but they wanted to go with us because they felt that we were more credible and we were going to do what we were going to do and stick to that. And so that it just gives the example around credibility over price. Is sometimes, it's not always price, it's who's going to do the deal. So agents think in the same way. And that goes for vendors as well, of course. And then the final piece, in terms of what we talked about there, is around investors. So as you start needing more to do more deals, if you're moving up the ranks and you're running out of your own cash, then you're gonna have to find investors. And then the same thing there, very similar kind of thing. Know, like, and trust, but ultimately they need, 1, the confidence in you, and 2, are you a credible person to back with their hard-earned money, and are you going to deliver what you said you're going to deliver, and are they going to get their money back? Yeah, no, I agree. The bit that I don't think we've spoken that much about is transparency as well. So I can't emphasize enough how transparency for both the agent, the investor, the vendor and the lender is key. You mentioned about the cash purchases. There's nothing worse than starting the project going, I'm a cash buyer, then it transpires to be bridging. Well, the transparency is out the window. It's going to be a massive dent in your credibility. Similarly, we have scenarios where we go to the lender, I've got my deposit, so I've got my money that my contribution, and then it transpires when we look at bank statements, actually that money's borrowed from somebody else, that it wasn't disclosed in the first instance. If somebody has to find that out as part of a process and it wasn't information that was volunteered, then you're fighting a losing battle. You've already set that conversation on tilt against you. So just be very transparent about it. Most people can work with most scenarios. You'll find the solution. Just don't try and hide things, because you think the best piece of advice that I would have is you want to present your deal in terms of strengths and weaknesses. If you show potential weaknesses, that shows the person that you understand what the
project is about, that adds credibility. I understand that my money's coming from a third party, and that means I haven't got that much skin in the game. However, to mitigate that, I'm going to be doing this, this, and this, and this. You can have a personal guarantee of them, which includes access to my house and all of that sort of stuff. Will help paint that picture to be a bit different. That just puts you on the right foot rather than trying to hide it in the first instance.
Yeah. So, look, I think we've covered a number of different elements here. And again, I think the one we missed out at the beginning was the builders. I think obviously if you're doing build projects, you need to have credibility with builders as well, that you, one, for your own sake, because builders have a good reputation of seeing somebody that lacks experience and lacks credibility and will take them for a bit of a ride on horseback or whatever. And but also, if it's a bigger project, builders will be concerned about your ability to fund it, especially if it's bigger projects, and if they don't want to get too in bed with people who haven't then got the resources because they don't have the credibility to fund the deal and things. So it works both ways. And so, just making sure that you're fully versed in the various, the right type of contractor for the type of contract, the size of the contractor. You wouldn't get a one-man band builder trying to do a 20-bed conversion, for instance. So it's just making sure you're pitching things at the right levels. But ultimately, what we're getting to here from a credibility piece is ultimately credibility creates opportunity. And the more credible you are, will potentially bring you more off-market deals. Agents will want to work with you, and you'll own that bit of headspace, and they'll pick up the phone to you when there's a deal. Even if it's on the market, they'll say, look, I don't know if you've seen this. We haven't heard of you. This deal's just come on. You'll get better finance rates. You got more opportunities to joint venture or get private investors and things. Well, you've got to tell everyone what you do, right? So that people know what you're doing. And then if you tell everyone what you do and you're putting it out there and then you're backing it up, then that builds credibility as well. And also what I think a lot of people, and this is where some people do well on social media, is that they share the mistakes that they make, because that also builds credibility on the bit. It's not all rosy and champagne and pictures of keys outside the front of the house or building or whatever once they've done the deal. It's actually, this is a deal we did, and these are some of the lessons that we made or some of the mistakes that we made, and this is how we solved those problems and communicated, etc. And that goes a long way, I think, with everyone along watching that journey. So those are some things to think about. Anything else from you, Mark, before we wrap this up?
No, I think you covered that. I did write social media down here, telling people what you do, but that requires clarity in the first instance. So rather than just dumping a load of pictures on an Instagram page, just have a think about what the story is you're trying to narrate, because that will speak to people. And lenders will do social media checks and see what you're about and so on. So don't be afraid to put it out there, warts and all, because we all know that things will go wrong. They might not go disastrously wrong, but there will be speed bumps in the road. That's part of the journey. So making sure that you can deal with those, is a surefire way of credibility. The other thing as well, I would just say is, obviously we're talking about your credibility to other people. Just making sure that you are assessing everybody else's credibility when they are speaking to you. So, that this credibility thing is a two-way street. Just what you deem as credible, just think about that when you're speaking to others, but also think about what others are saying to you and are they credible? Because if you are relying on the credibility of someone else, i.e. a builder, and they aren't going to do what they say they're going to do, then they're ultimately going to destroy your credibility at the same time. So again, we focused on your own, but just think about that as part of the conversation as well.
Awesome. Absolutely agree with you there. So let's wrap it up then. So just to kind of bring it all together, this is the last episode in this mini series. And, we've talked about this now for a long time. We haven't actually spoken about it on the podcast. So it's good to get this out there. Without clarity, you don't necessarily know where you're going. Without confidence, you won't take action. And without credibility, other people won't want to work with you. So when all of the three overlap, that's when investors become primed to create momentum rather than simply owning a property. So if you want to grow a portfolio, really consider the 3 C's, spend some time working on the clarity and making sure you've got your criteria set up so that you can get out there and do some deals. So thanks for your time, Mark, as always. Really appreciate it. And we'll see you on the next episode.
Yeah, take care, guys. Thank you.
So that brings us to the end of the Momentum Investing mini-series. Over the last 3 episodes, we've explored the importance of clarity, confidence, and credibility, and how these 3 principles work together to create long-term momentum. Markets will change, interest rates will move, and property strategies will evolve. But these foundations remain the same. Know where you're going, have the confidence to take action, and build the kind of reputation that makes people want to work with you. I hope you've enjoyed the series and have found it useful. If you have, we'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone else on their property journey. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Prime Property Finance Podcast. Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. We hope you have learned something and have some tips to take away. We'd be very grateful if you enjoyed the show. You could give us a review and share with anyone that you know that may be interested. And of course, subscribe to the show so you can get notified when a new episode is released. If you'd like us to answer any questions or go deeper on a specific topic, please drop us a message at primeproperty.finance. See you on the next episode.